for joining this event tonight. First of all, I would like to thank the Amilcar Cabral Library for hosting us and also to express our solidarity. You know that today there is an important demonstration in Bologna these very minutes, and we all are there actually in our spirits, and we also know that many people attending this demonstration or wanting to join this event, so we are all connected, and we are also recording tonight, and the recording will be available for those who are not with us in person. We organized today's evening during an horrific month and a half, weeks of devastation and death. We all know that this does not come from a vacuum. It is deeply rooted in the history of dispossession and colonization. And today's events wish to connect past and present through geographies and archives, as we decided to title this event. And today, also because geographies and archives are deeply interconnected individuals and for individuals, for families and for communities, in the past and in the present. And we are also creating new geographies and new archives in these weeks and months and days. And this is also why we decided to call this event Gaza in Palestine, not Gaza and Palestine, as sometimes we read. And we also, in this way, wish to think about persons, families, communities, archivists, geographers, scholars, students. I would like to give some data on the current situation concerning also the educational and the university system in Palestine. According to the Palestinian Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research, as of 6th of November, so we are already 10 days later, more than 400 faculty have been killed, and 9 higher education buildings have been completely or partially damaged, among them the universities in Gaza, and buildings also in the National University, located at the Palestinian Technical University. Education has been completely disrupted in 19 higher education institutions, affecting in this way more than 80,000 students. And indeed, as of 13th of November, about 300 school buildings have sustained damage. The war has prevented 550 students from Gaza from enrolling scholarship abroad. And as a result of the ongoing death, displacement, and destruction, the Palestinian Ministry of Education suspended this school year for more than 625,000 Palestinian school children in the Gaza Strip. These are not numbers. Many of the speakers that we will hear tonight have repeated that these are not only numbers, these are people. And tonight we are grateful to 𝐏𝐚𝐥𝐞𝐬𝐭, Mark Levine, Basali, and Sandra Mezzadra for talking about archives, geographies related to these people. I briefly introduce our guests and their specialities and main works. This list could be much longer, but I want to leave the floor to their words. 𝐏𝐚𝐥𝐞𝐬𝐭 is Margaret Anstey Fellow at 𝐏𝐚𝐥𝐞𝐬𝐭 College and affiliate lecturer in the Faculty of History at the University of Cambridge. She's completing a book on the history of education for Palestinians. Their work revolves around 3 main themes: social history of Palestinians, the politics and practice of archives, and comparative settler colonialism. She co-convenes the archives of Disappeared Research Network, and she's a founding committee member of the Librarians and Archivists with Palestine. And she's a member also of a number of institutions and also contributed editor of the Jerusalem Quarterly. Mark Levine is professor of modern Middle Eastern history and chair, programming in Global Middle East Studies School of Humanities at the University of California, Irvine. His research and teaching focus on social, cultural, and urban histories of the Middle East, North and Sub-Saharan Africa, globalization and culture. Also migration, refugee studies, critical theory, decolonial and indigenous theories. He is the author of a number of publications, including Impossible Peace, Israel-Palestine since 1989, and his research has been published on several publishers, also in very recent years. And Ruba Sadi, she's a professor of anthropology at the Department of the Arts at the Università di Bologna. From 2010 to 2022, she was professor at the Department of Anthropology and Sociology at the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. She's the author of several publications on gender and transnationalism, and also in Italian, Musulmane liberate, donne, Islam, modernità. And she's also a member of the board of the Society of Palestinian Anthropologists. And with us, we have also Sandro Mezzadra. Sandro is a friend of this library, the Amilcar Cabral Library, and is a professor of political theory at the Department of Arts at the University of Bologna, and adjunct research fellow at the Institute for Culture and Society, Western Sydney University. His research interests include borders, migration, post-colonial theory, critical theory, and contemporary capitalism. Now I would like to leave the floor to our three speakers, and then Sandro and me, we will intervene, and we also have time for your interventions and questions and points you may wish to highlight. So thank you again to all of you for being with us in person, and the floor is yours.
First of all, I'm in a way speechless, which is hard to be, but when I think about the numbers in Gaza, more people have been killed in 1 month in Gaza, more Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces in Gaza than have been killed in Ukraine by Russian forces in 2 years. So let us begin with understanding the scale, and I'm sure most people here are horrified at what we were seeing in Ukraine. The last 2 years, it's been compressed into 1 month. In a space, Ukraine's a giant country, Gaza is tiny. You can almost see the Israeli fence from the beach if it was flat. So we need to understand the scale of the violence is really unprecedented. Nevertheless, the first thing I can think of whenever I am asked to say anything about Gaza is that Gaza is a beautiful place. Even now, under the rubble, it's a beautiful place. The beach is beautiful in Gaza. The fields are beautiful. The sand, which you think, and this is so important to Zionism, where everything is about, there was sand, that means it was empty, and then we made something grow out of this nothingness. Anything grows out of the sand in Gaza, right? It's beautiful, just like the entire coast of Palestine. So Gaza was, and will be a beautiful place again. But certainly, it's not right now. It's a place of extreme horror and violence, and one that could only be expected, because this is the logic of settler colonialism. And this is the logic of ethno-nationalism. And when you bring together ethno-nationalism and settler colonialism, you wind up where we are right now. And sorry, I'm getting angry, so I'm speaking fast. I'll try to slow down a bit, and also could answer questions in Italian afterwards. In 2018, there was a great March of Return in Gaza, and it was an amazing event. It was an event that was as much in many ways against Hamas's long attempts to frustrate any kind of civil militancy as it was against the occupation itself. And one of the tragic ironies of the last month is that the person whose idea was a journalist, an amazing journalist, Ahmed Abu Arki, his son was killed just the last week or 2 weeks ago, I think, by Israeli forces. So, and the reason I mention that, because this poor, beautiful child's murder is no better, no worse than all the other children who've been horrifically killed in this fighting, on both sides, by the way. Obviously, killing any civilian is horrible. But his death is just a symbol of how any attempt by Palestinians to fight this occupation using militancy, nonviolent militancy, the thing everyone always asks of them, is just met by more death, right, and more violence. Anyone who's spent any time in Palestine has seen that with our own eyes. There's simply, no matter what you do, the response is violence by Israel. Intense, structural, relentless violence, decade after decade. Right? Almost half of Palestinian men have been incarcerated in Israel. When Hamas lists some of its reasons for engaging in the attack on October 7th, part of it was the utter frustration at the inability to get any prisoners released. And there have been hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Palestinians imprisoned unjustly and illegally under international law by Israel. So this is and no one cares. No one who matters in the world who has power cares or does anything about it, just as they've done nothing to stop the violence now. And this goes to just one point I want to make, because we're talking about archives and geographies. First of all, almost all the Palestinian archives at some point have been stolen by Israel. They've been taken. When I wanted to do my PhD research on the Islamic court records in Jaffa, another beautiful coastal town that was empty of its majority of its Palestinian population, in 1948, I had to go to the University of Haifa and use microfilm that was provided ultimately by the Israeli authorities, because they stole all of the records of the local courts when they conquered Jaffa in 1948. They've stolen the records in Beirut. They've stolen the records everywhere. So, and this is of course a crime against humanity and part of a larger project to erase, first discursively erase, legally erase, historically erase, and then ultimately physically erase as much of the Palestinian population as possible over the last century. So archives, then we need an entirely new understanding in many ways of the archive. And this is something that African American scholars and authors like Toni Morrison and others have really, Shadia Hartman, have really tried to grapple with. What happens when you don't have an archive, when so many of the voices have been silenced? How do you create a history? And that is a challenge that Palestinians have risen to as scholars, but you can never underestimate how hard it's been. And the last thing I want to say is just about geography. Geography is everything in Palestine and Israel, right? Obviously. It's a 19th century nationalist conflict between two peoples over one land, which is overlaid with a settler colonial enterprise in a neoliberal post-20th century setting. The three worst possible combination discourses you can put together if you want to have peace and justice and freedom are all coagulated and mixed up in this one land. But what's interesting to me is that Israel has created what scholars refer to as a matrix of control. I'm sure most of you know that term, if you know anything about Palestine and the occupation, which is so pervasive in the West Bank, which is, of course, the prize for Israel, the dowry that Israel wants without having to take the bride. They have created such an intense matrix that it really is almost like the quantum realm in physics, what I call a kind of quantum mechanics exists in the West Bank. If there's a piece of territory and a Palestinian walks on that territory, immediately Israelis appear out of everywhere, right? Usually settlers from one end, maybe soldiers from another, and that land becomes closed. And so the very presence of a Palestinian, or from the other hand, if a settler, or a soldier, or a team of soldiers goes on a piece of land, an open field, suddenly that land is a military zone. And just the presence of anyone on land can change its literal physical reality immediately, right? That's how the occupation works. And it serves to control the movements through this intense system of surveillance and control and violence, to make it almost impossible for Palestinians to move freely, never mind to build any kind of contiguous territory that they could have any kind of control over. Now Gaza, however, was always what Israel hoped to just get rid of. It didn't have the same importance biblically. It wasn't really ever controlled by most of the ancient biblical kingdoms or rulers in Israel. So it was always a place, even though there were settlers, that they could sort of get rid of and hopefully dump the 2 million people there on someone else's responsibility. The problem is that they tried to have a matrix of control in Gaza without actually controlling the territory. And we see what happened, right? It's actually impossible, which is how Hamas was able to build all the network of tunnels, was able to do things like literally stage, practice runs for the raids with flying kites, people on kites and all this kind of stuff, and so easily defeat this seemingly impregnable border wall fairly easily once they decided to do that. And this is a huge challenge to the Israeli idea that you can just write off Gaza and then slowly annex the West Bank, and just like it annexed East Jerusalem. So this really is an inflection point, right? The goal of most every Israeli government, certainly since 2000, has been to slowly strangle Palestinian national life. It's been politicized, if not genocide, certainly politicized, as the late Israeli sociologist 𝐏𝐚𝐥𝐞𝐬𝐭 called it. But now it realizes it can't do that, and this is why I'm so scared, because I don't see the world really doing much to stop what is happening in Gaza, and the goal clearly is not just to get rid of Gaza somehow, or get rid of a huge share of the population, but to also clean out as much of the West Bank as possible, if things fall the right way. So it demands even more vigilance, and all I want to say to end is that, this is a very long struggle, but it's also a global struggle. What's happening in Palestine is not just about Palestine. It's about the future of humanity in an era where we are having a climate change disaster coming ever closer to us, where the 2 billion people in the global south are going to be on the move in the next 30 years, and where the leaders of the global north, the same people who are giving Israel a blank check, want a blank check for themselves to do whatever they have to keep themselves safe from the rest of humanity. So hopefully this struggle that we see growing larger is going to encompass the environmental movement, the climate justice movement, and others, because in the end they're all intimately related, and there will never be any kind of victory in Palestine of defeating this colonial apartheid occupation until and unless it's part of a larger victory against this suicidal capitalist system that's going to kill us all. So I wish I could end on a more positive note, but I think it is positive, because if we can all join together in all these various movements, we actually have a chance not just to help free Palestine, but to help free all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chiara, and everyone involved in organizing this beautiful gathering. I'm really honored to be here, and I look forward to our conversation. I suppose my task here tonight is to talk a bit about archives, what they might look like, what the destruction of so much of Gaza means for Palestinian and Palestine history. I come in part, as a historian. And as a historian, I'm concerned with transformation. I'm concerned with change, and history as a way of thinking about change, how it is forged, where, and for what means. And archives, I think, are in part, at least, a toolkit for change. So what does it mean that for the last 100 years, Palestinian archives have been confiscated, destroyed, and sort of cordoned off and stolen? Well, I don't want to talk about actually what it means for Palestinian history today. What I want to talk about is how Palestinians responded to that century of destruction and theft and confiscation. For the last 100 years, Palestinians have developed myriads of libraries and institutions both in Palestine and its diaspora, in order to collect, to recover, to retrieve. Tonight, I'll talk about 3 forms of archival recovery. Let me take you through them. The 3 are memory, material, and document. Memory work has been central to Palestinian history and historical work for at least 75 years. Immediately after the 1948 war and the Nakba and the expulsion of Palestinians, Palestinian refugees, these very expelled people, began to write and author their own histories, village memoirs, collections of diaries, gatherings of letters. Often, this material was kept privately, in their own homes, in the homes of, in the family sort of collection. Sometimes it was shared, and sometimes it was published. Here, I want to emphasize that Palestinians are part of a much older tradition of doing this. At least in the 20th century, and perhaps most famously as a result of the Armenian genocide, the idea of writing memoirs and memories of one's destroyed home, destroyed village, was central to the memory work of the 20th century. There have also been myriad of oral history projects. One beautiful one is the Nakba Archive, which is available online, but there is also the American University of Beirut Special Collections, and there are also ethnographies and printed oral historical work, including by my wonderful colleague here, Ruba Saleh, who has done work on the lives of refugees after the Nakba, as well as work by Rosemary Salia and others. Other kinds of memory work are slightly different in tonality. Here I include the incredible archival retrieval of musicians and composers and choreographers, dance troupes, al-fanun, music groups and bands, 47 Soul. There is also embodied archives through performance, the beautiful work of Farah Saleh and al-Ajawid Dabka troupe in Baqa refugee camp. So there's a whole myriad of ways memory has come alive for Palestinians as a form of archival retrieval. The second form, material.